I'm Erin Carlisle, one of the editors at House, here to discuss the recently released 2020 U.S. House State of the Industry report. The House State of the Industry study is an annual report that represents the health of the home improvement industry by surveying businesses on house related to residential renovation and design. For this report, we surveyed over 3,000 pros in 7 industry groups: architects, interior designers, building pros, which include general contractors, remodelers, and builders, as well as design build firms, building and renovation specialty firms such as carpenters and cabinet installers, landscape and outdoor specialty firms, and decorating specialty firms. In this video, we're going to discuss how design-related firms fared last year and their predictions for this year. We'll cover the 5 big ideas from the report. Our annual survey garners significant sample sizes. We received responses from 495 architects and 561 interior designers. Since House is primarily focused on residential construction and design, the businesses on House skew heavily towards the residential practice, with 80 to 90% of revenue coming from work on existing homes or new home construction. It's important to keep this in mind when analyzing the survey findings. Our first big idea is that most architects and interior designers have a relatively optimistic outlook for 2020. Our interior designer survey respondents had an outlook similar to our construction-related pros, but architects had the least optimistic outlook among all the groups. Nearly 1/3 reported a neutral outlook for 2020, and only 21% reported a very good outlook. Overall, expectations for 2020 revenue growth were positive, but lower than in prior years. Our second big idea is that overall, firms have improved expectations for the national economy compared with last year. That said, firms across the industry groups still predict that the national economy is more likely to worsen than get better. About 1/3 of interior designers forecast this, while 43% of architects do. Drilling down more locally, we found that both architects and interior designers have a positive outlook on the demand for their services during this year. Both groups are fairly bullish on 2020. 66% of interior designers and 58% of architects expect demand for their services to improve. Overall, both groups also have a relatively neutral view of their local economies, although nearly 1/5 of architects expect that their local economies will worsen this year. Our third big idea is that revenue growth slowed noticeably last year. In fact, in 2019, firms experienced their lowest revenue growth in 6 years. Architects saw sales growth drop by 2.5 percentage points, interior designers by just under 2 percentage points. While annual growth rates were positive in 2019, 36% of architects and 40% of interior design firms felt that revenues in 2019 fell short of their expectations. One interesting thing to point out is that small companies reported low 2019 growth rates compared with large companies. For example, architecture firms with no employees grew 1.5%, while architecture companies with 1 to 4 employees grew 4.3%. A fourth key idea is that firms are struggling with rising costs. More than half of both interior design and architecture firms expect costs for products and materials to rise in 2020. In the past, we found that companies in the construction sector were consistently most affected by these rising costs, but this is not the case anymore, and the concerns about costs are widespread among all 7 industry groups. Many businesses expect the cost of doing business to rise in 2020, in part because of material costs, but also due to the labor market. Tariffs have made the news a lot in the past year, and firms do link rising costs with tariffs. 1/3 of architects and interior designers reported a negative impact of tariffs on businesses in 2019. Businesses report a wide range of products and materials impacted by tariffs, from metal, steel, and wood to cabinets, tile, and quartz. For example, architects frequently mention steel, metal, and wood, among other products and materials impacted by tariffs in 2019. Our last big idea is that hiring is still a challenge. We know from what pros tell us that finding quality, skilled labor has been an issue for businesses for some time. Reflecting that, last year fewer businesses hired employees than in 2018. And as we look forward, many firms in the design-related industries expect labor availability and labor costs to worsen in 2020. That said, 1/5 of design-related firms plan to hire in 2020. Thanks so much for watching. That's it for now, but if you'd like to learn more, please visit houzz.com/research.